We've got Jeff Katzman, Dr. Katzman, a professor of psychiatry at the University of New Mexico, just right down the road. He serves as vice chair and director of an international program on psychological resilience training. He and Dan O'Connor have done a lot of work together on how improv can help someone, help yourself, help others. Their previous book together was called Life Unscripted, using improv principles to get unstuck, boost confidence, and transform your life. Dan O'Connor is a multifaceted actor, improviser, writer, and director, a very talented television and stage guy who's worked around the world. He's worked in London, he's from San Francisco, and he's tuning in tonight from Los Angeles. Thank you both for joining us. Please tell us a little bit more about your new book, Ensemble.
All right, Amanda, thanks so much. We're very happy to be here. I wanted to, the last time we did this, we did it in Jeff's backyard in Albuquerque. Yeah, it's fantastic.
We did. Yeah, so Dan, welcome back to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Yes,
it's great to be in Albuquerque virtually, Jeff.
Thank you. One day soon, live. So hi everybody. We thought that we would talk to you a little bit about why a psychiatrist and an improviser got together, and how that happened, and what we've shared in terms of our understandings of life and the mistakes we've made along the way, and how we wrote our first book, and then what this book really is about, and how we came to that. So with that, Dan, how did we meet?
Well, Jeff took a improv class from Second City. He auditioned and he got in, and he was taking class with a group of people in Second City, and they decided to take my class at LA Theater Sports way back in the dawn of man. He was a student of mine. He was taking improv classes, theater sports classes, and then using the games, and I'll let you talk about this, Jeff, using the games that I was teaching at theater sports and applying them while he was a resident at UCLA working at the VA.
Yeah, and I realized actually a couple of things from that experience. First was that I love hanging out in the improv theaters, and I was with a group of people, and there were a lot of people who were studying improv who most of us were not actors. We had no knowledge of improv, whatever, but we were trying to be part of a community. That's not so easy these days. Since families sit around and watch television, really, it's not common to have an experience necessarily in the community. So it was so nice to be able to be with folks from all walks of life who were playing together. And I was a resident at UCLA at the time, and also realized I was learning something about play and about communication and how you build something with somebody and collaborate with them. And I was learning more doing improv with you, Dan, than I necessarily was during my residency about how we can connect with each other and how we collaborate.
And we started talking. Jeff and I had a series of coffees and conversations over the years, talking about how both of us were finding applications for improvisation offstage in our personal lives, and other parts of our professional lives that didn't have anything to do with improvising. In fact, one of the inspirations was what Jeff was talking about. There were so many people who were taking improv classes from us in Los Angeles who had no interest in being on TV or being an actor. They just, it was their, I guess the 90s version of book club or a bowling league. It was getting together, laughing, and creating stories with each other. And we had not only psychiatrists taking the classes, but we had contractors, lawyers, visual artists. It was an incredible myriad of different constituencies of people in LA who were taking the classes. And we came to, finally, after many, many coffees, that we decided we would write a book, since we were applying it so much. I was doing a lot of work teaching improvisation as engagement tools to corporations, team building stuff, performance building things, executive training, that sort of thing. And Jeff was using it in teaching residents as well as in dealing how to engage with patients. So it made sense for us to collaborate together and put this in book form. And one of the things that we wanted to address right off the bat was the fact that I think a lot of times people think about improvisation as whose line is it anyway, or commedia dell'arte, or whatever. They think of it as a performance skill. And if you think about it, we all improvise all day, every day. I'm basically improvising right now. Jeff and I will be improvising throughout this chat. But most of us don't take an improv class. And when Jeff and I discovered that there were schools, there's schools in the United States, but we learned at the time that there were schools in Canada where middle school and high school kids could letter being on the school improv team. And so it was giving kids who maybe weren't interested in sports or maybe weren't as physical a way to learn how to socialize and engage with each other and learn how to tell their stories. So narrative improvisation for Jeff and I became this tool that we could apply to almost every aspect of our lives.
When we started in our first book, when we were writing that, really trying to understand the way that the guidelines from improvisation, saying things like saying yes and befriending our mistakes and seeing them as opportunities, and understanding these really important values to collaboration are also the keys to starting to unscript ourselves and to address our own interpersonal life patterns, and start to play with the edges of, maybe I could play a sport, or maybe I could sing a song. We get so many messages growing up, and we become restricted into certain personalities without tools about how to take adventures slightly beyond who we think we are, to unscript ourselves. So that was really the genesis of our first book, was how to do that, and how to take a little small adventure, drive a different way to work, and find new parts of ourselves, the new characters within ourselves.
And for in both books, what we're I think preaching is about being present. Like Jeff just said, with driving a different way to work, one of the things that we talked about in some of the classes that we were teaching was, if you drive to work the same way, of course now nobody's driving to work, but when you did drive to work or walk to work, if you do it the same way every day, you probably don't wake up until 10 o'clock, because you're in a basically nothing is new for you. And what we were talking about was maybe driving a different way to work, or stopping and having breakfast somewhere else. That's just an example of trying to think about how can we be more present in the moment. Because when we're more present, we're more playful, and we listen to each other better. And a lot of these skills translate, if you do work in a corporate environment, the idea of you've all been in a meeting where someone is just waiting for someone's mouth to stop. You're waiting for someone's mouth to stop moving so you can say the genius thing you've been thinking about while you haven't been listening to them. So we talked about that, and how important in order to make a relationship resonant, it is to listen actively and to be present for each other. And the skills of improvisation are all about actively listening and being present for one another. So
this really set of skills from improvisation, married with really depth psychodynamic ideas, was kind of the context of our first book, and really was about the individual and our internal psyche and way of well-being. And then Dan and I, like all of us, found ourselves in a pandemic recently. And, at first we'd hear of the Bay Area going on lockdown for 3 weeks, and who knew that this would go for 14 months? But it was really an experience that was kind of antithetical to improvisation, and that just highlighted for all of us, I think, how important it is that we can connect with each other. And I think most of us began to think of, who's in my life? Who do I need to check on? Who have I said hello to recently? And that really became what we saw as like the loneliness antidote. And so Dan and I made ourselves a little bit of loneliness experts, and we read all about it and understood the cost of loneliness and the epidemic of loneliness that preceded our pandemic even, and the forces behind that, and how we don't even say hello to each other in a market or in a food court. We're surrounded by people all day who we rarely meet, and we really turn to each other to start talking about what is the process whereby people connect, and what does improv have to say about that, and what is an improv ensemble, and the characters of an ensemble have to teach us about that. So we wrote this book really from the perspective of different personalities coming to a class, but also really underscoring how we connect, how we pay attention to one another, and most of all, how important we are all to one another. When I look at kind of the names here who've joined, it's very heartwarming to me, because so many of you are part of my own ensemble that I carry in my head. And we rely on each other, and we need each other. And I think Dan and I were able to do that a bit for each other during the pandemic, just even through regular phone calls.
So Jeff, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about Ensemble, specifically about the book? I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
So we stumbled on this idea of an ensemble, an improv ensemble, and then we thought there must be some verb to ensemble, and realized it's not a word. There is no verb of ensemble. We thought, cool, we'll make it up. There is to assemble, but ensemble is a little bit different. There's a sense of connecting to it. So that's what the book really is about, is our playful way of exploring this process of how we connect with one another, what improvisers do to build things together, what Dan's group does in creating 2+ hour narratives out of nothing. And then our book is really tracking the characters who come to an improv workshop, and understanding what they bring and what they need. And each chapter describes them, describes some improv activities and how those are similar to psychodynamic or ideas. And then each chapter ends with summary points and stuff to try. We then take the second half of the book, and we apply these points to really our ensembles that many of us are in, that we carry with our families, with our workplace and our community, and how we operate, and how can we build a better place by realizing that we are in these ensembles, and these are vital, important relationships, and how can we really cherish them.
And we should say to everybody that we're going to do some Q&A towards the end. So if you have questions, as Jeff and I are caffeinatedly talking, please jot them down in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Did you want to read, Dan, a little something from the book to even
Sure.
the idea of what improv is and how that has to do with what we're talking about?
Sure. I'll just read a little bit from the book that kind of
I will say too, if you get the audio version, Dan is the narrator of many hours.
So this is kind of a trailer? No. First, improvisational theater 101. What is it? And why might it be important to think about for all of us interested in forming a stronger sense of belonging? But wait a minute, we hear some of you say, I'm not an actor and I don't want to do theater. Yes, we got you. Theater is, for our purposes, just a space to unpack these things and make them accessible and easily digested. And at its most basic level, improvisational theater involves creating something out of nothing, creating characters, relationships, and stories in the moment. It involves working together with a partner or a group to discover a new story. Improvisational theater can involve exercises that we describe in the book. It could mean creating a full-length play inspired by Shakespeare. Fundamentally, It's a group working together toward a common goal, discovering relationships and creating story. Among the players, the ensemble, it involves the development of a sense of trust, respect, community, and compassion. Improvisers follow a set of guidelines in working together as a group. These can be considered by all of us as a sort of anti-loneliness prescription as we apply them to the relationships in our lives. As improvisers follow these ideas and create a story, they also work with processes that inevitably emerge from any group or team in strengthening of their ensemble. Understanding the group dynamics experienced by an improv team can also help us to positively impact any group in which we find ourselves. So that is a bit of an introduction in terms of how improv applies to what we're talking about. We are mammals who reason. We're reasoning mammals. And we talk in narrative. If I were to meet anybody on this call at a party, we might exchange each other's story. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What kind of pet might you have? Stuff like that. So we exchange stories. We talk in narrative. In fact, one of the things that Jeff and I talk about in the books is that good story actually creates oxytocin in the brain. You feel good when you're listening to good story. And we think of every relationship as a story. Not that it's fabricated, but that there's a connection together in how we relate to each other.
Yeah. So, Dion, we talked a little bit about who comes to an improv workshop, and people come from all walks of life. Can you say a little bit about what you've seen people get out of that and bring into their lives?
Oh, a sense of belonging. There's a number of people who've studied with our company, Improv Theater here in LA, who have a real sense of community. They have an ensemble in which they feel is a safe place for them to have fun. It's a playful space. There's a lot of relationships that have popped up out of this space. But the connection and sense of play that people feel is visceral, I think, in how they relate to each other and how they express themselves. So one of the things that improv students walk away with is a sense of community and a sense of connection, which we think is really important. And one of the virtues we're extolling in the book is connection and active listening. Compassion is another thing. Compassion and empathy. If we're creating a story together on an improv stage, all we have is each other in order to create something. Off stage, if I am making my partner look good is one of the number one improv guidelines. And what Jeff and I talk about is taking that guideline and applying it to our real life. If I'm having a conversation with Jeff and my goal is to make my partner look good, if I'm putting my attention on him, to a certain extent, it alleviates the anxiety that I may be feeling in the moment about whatever I'm doing. In other words, paying attention and being empathetic and engaged with another person makes you feel good. We have lots of pithy improv sayings. One of them is, if you're interested, you're interesting. When I begin to make my partner look good by putting my attention on Jeff, I also am helping Jeff to feel that he's in a place where he can be truthful and engaged and present with me. I don't know if I answered your question, but
you totally did. Okay. So I want to talk about one way that improv in our book is really married to an emerging psychological paradigm that's called mentalizing or reflective functioning, or we could call it perspective taking. And it was dawning on us as we were writing that actually we feel connected when we understand each other. And an improviser needs to be able to bring themselves to a group or to a relationship So not like, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know. Where, somebody's got to bring something. But also an improviser needs to be aware of their partner or the group around them and what they're bringing and where that story's going. So similar concept that's emerged out of the attachment literature of Fonagy and Bateman stuff called mentalizing really is, can I know what's going on in me, and can I know what's going on in you, and hold that in a representation that I get it. And when that happens, we don't feel lonely anymore. We feel connected to each other. So that's really a lot of what our book is about. As Dan said, not just taking turns and saying, oh yeah, that reminds me of something that happened to me, but actually getting super curious about another person and wondering about them and asking them questions and building on their reality. That's really where we can learn from each other and learn about ourselves as people are tuning to us and actually reflecting our world. We can wonder about things we've never wondered about before and see stories in ways that we've never seen them before.
Actually, do you want to play a game?
Let's play a game.
Okay. So Jeff and I are just going to do an exercise. And one thing we should stress about the book is that, as Jeff said, at the end of every chapter, there's a sort of takeaways and also stuff to try. Improvisation is a practice. I just got finished doing a 6-month teaching thing with a bunch of engineers. And one of the things that we had to keep reminding them is that, like any skill, this is a practice. And there's a corollary with regards to meditation, because improvisation is to a certain extent mindfulness on your feet. So we'd like to remind people that it's not, I'm going to read the book and everything will be solved. It's reading the book and looking at the ensembles in your life and addressing what do you need from them, what do they take from you, what have you, and also starting a practice of being more mindful in your relationships. So this is an exercise that we do. I'm going to pretend that I'm playing Jeff in a movie, and I'm interviewing him about this movie, but we're going to, the pronoun, I'm going to use what was I like, and Jeff is going to say, you were like this, even though he's talking about himself. And we'll do a little demo of this. And this is an exercise that's about connection, and it's about engagement and listening. So Jeff, what was I like when I was 15?
Yeah, when you were 15, you were pretty skinny, and you were pretty scared of some of the kind of BMOC folks in high school. But you were really a student, and you would just study and study to get good grades, and you wished really that you were a little cooler than you were coming across.
So BMOC, I was afraid of the big men on campus.
You were so afraid of them. They were so cool. Some of them had like beards and stuff already, and they were, 16, and they were in cars already, and you were taking the school bus to school with your French horn that didn't really fit in the bus. You were a little anxious a little bit, and you just hoped you wouldn't get bullied.
What did I do on the weekends? What was something to alleviate my stress and anxiety that I would do?
Yeah, you would trade baseball cards with your brother, actually, and so you would meet different kids in the neighborhood. It was a kind of new neighborhood you had moved into, and then you started to actually build friendships in this new neighborhood, and you started having creative kinds of parties, costume parties, and things like that. So you started using your imagination toward a good time.
So can you what party did I throw, or what party did I enjoy most when I was 15?
Yeah, when you were 15, you threw a party that was an anonymous a costume party where you were and two friends were the secret hosts actually, and you sent a letter with the Lord's Prayer on it, and told people that that they were to be at this address at a certain time, and everyone was to arrive in full costume, and then they did, and then they took off their costumes, and you had such a good sense actually, even then, right then, about how important friendships were that you were developing, and that was helping you not feel like such a scared kind of non-BMOC.
Okay, all right, we'll stop there. That's terrific. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you for playing me. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how did that feel, talking about yourself but using that pronoun?
Yeah, it was a relief to not have to be me, and that you're going to be me actually, first of all, and yeah, so connected with you that you're that interested in me and can keep wondering and asking questions what it was like to be me, and it seems like that there's always a next logical question that can come from that, and I just appreciated then I would have to think more and more what was going on when I was 15, but it was easier to do that through your interest, through your days. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a theologian, and man, the next time we do this, I have to write his name. I think we quote him in the first book. I'm not going to take the time to look, but the quote that really connected for me and Jeff was, "The feeling of being heard is not unlike the feeling of being loved." And if you think about it, when you really feel heard by somebody, it's so impactful. For me, it opens doors if I'm talking to someone and I realize that they're actually paying attention and invested in our conversation. It's a game changer, because so much of conversation is people waiting, like Jeff said, waiting to get to the part where they can talk about themselves again. And it's an instant resonator, engagement tool, what have you, to connecting when you really listen. I know it sounds incredibly basic, but when you really listen to somebody, it makes them feel good, and it makes you feel good, and you feel present. Anything you want to say about the game? Other things about the game?
No, I just think it's a really fun thing to try with other people. I've experienced as a really important thing in training of actually psychiatry residents to play this game. People are a little blown away about actually how we don't get curious or listen to another person very easily, and how nice it feels when somebody is. And I think this idea of curiosity and wonder comes naturally to many people, and not to others, but can. And I think it's a part of ourselves that we can really develop, and is really the way that we can all become to feel a little less lonely, even within our relationships, because even if we feel we don't have something to bring to those relationships necessarily, we can get curious. And yeah, so I would say that.
I think that's important. It's one of the things we extol in the books, is that level of listening and how important it is. I know in my marriage, I'm very aware of my Achilles heel relationship-wise, is that I can drift off. But like in meditation, where, thoughts may come, and we're taught to go back to the breath, return to the breath, go back to the breath. It's the same thing is true in conversation, to come back to who you're talking to. And in my case, come back to my wife, come back to my wife, come back to my wife, and make sure that I'm present. And if I do space it, acknowledge the fact that I went to Cincinnati in my mind for a moment, or whatever it is. Do you want to play another game?
Sure.
And then we'll take some questions.
Yeah.
So this is a game that we teach to everybody. In fact, I just taught it to the engineers that I was working with, called ACE, and it's Advance, Color, and Emotion. And in this game, Jeff is going to be my story coach. And he's going to be able to say at the end of every sentence either advance, which means to move the story forward, or color, which means give me some detail. And he can be nosy and curious and say, color what she was wearing, color what the weather was like, that sort of thing. And the last thing is emotion. So advance, color, emotion. And when he says emotion, I will talk about the emotion in the story. So I'm going to tell a story. Speaking of my wife, I'm going to tell a story that I've told many times before, but I haven't told it in this moment. And Jeff is going to be my coach, and we're just going to do the first minute of it. And then we'll talk about it. Okay, so when I was going to propose, I had picked out a park in London.
Advance.
It was New Year's Eve day. It was cold, and I walked her all over the place trying to find the perfect place to propose.
Color the park.
The color of the park was this intense silvery green, and the grass looked like Christmas tinsel because there was so much ice in it.
Advance.
We were playing a game. I was trying to distract her. We were playing a game. I was walking around for about an hour, and then I finally found a good place to do it.
Emotion.
I was sick to my stomach because we hadn't talked about getting married, and I didn't know whether she would say yes or not.
Advance.
I found this log, and I told her, sit on this frozen log in the middle of an ice field, and I'm going to take your picture.
Color what she was wearing.
She's wearing a long black coat with a sort of red and white checkered scarf. Yeah.
Advance.
Okay, let's stop there. So,
but she said yes.
The good news, yes, she said yes. Yes, there it is. So that game we play a lot, just in terms of the mindset of being curious about the other person. Also, I'm telling parts of the story that I've never told before because of the way Jeff is asking me questions. Well, let me ask you, how did you feel being the story coach?
Yeah, I want to know more and more, and those just even those little anchors, those cues, Dan, help me actually to frame what I could be thinking about. Rather than just to listen to you, I'm more actively engaged with what you're talking about and actually wondering, oh, what did it look like there? What were you feeling there? And so that pulls my attention in toward your story rather than into my own internal world and wondering what I'm going to say next or getting lost in my own preoccupation in one way or another. So yeah, to tune into another person is such a relief sometimes. Actually.
Yeah. And one thing, we teach improv students, if you start thinking about good ideas while the other person's talking, then you've missed the best idea, which is whatever they said. The more you go internal and think about your own ideas of, oh, what would be something funny to say here or something like that, the more you go away from the moment. As opposed to me thinking about myself being Jeff's story coach and him thinking about himself being my story coach and us creating a narrative together. And off stage, the idea is just to pay attention, to be in the moment. So much of our lives is spent thinking about, if I can just get through until Friday, if I can just get to Friday at 5 o'clock, everything will be fine. And really, we're missing so much of what's going on right now, worrying about what has happened or what may happen, that we're not happening. So that concept in improv, all we have is the moment. And what we're trying to do with the books is to get people to be actively thinking about how to be present for each other.
And I know there are some physicians, psychiatrists on the line here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And with some of you, I know I've had this very conversation. How do you help trainees get interested in the conversation they're having with their patients when they're sitting behind computer screens, when they're trying to fill rapidly electronic medical records and follow algorithms? How do you actually help somebody who went into this because they're interested in people and helping people get actually really find their way to listening again and being interested. And so I have found that these experiences and these skills really do help clinicians actually pay attention and learn to wonder and find the humanity within themselves and their patients that help to make better doctors.
So I know Amanda would want me to remind everybody right now to buy the book and get it locally. I guess at this point, if you have any questions about stuff that we've talked about, we would be happy to answer them if we can. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. That was really fun and really interesting. I was interested in your interesting talk. You talked a little bit about how your work relates to physicians. You talked a little bit about how it might relate in a husband-wife or spousal relationship. What I'm wondering about is parenting. One of you made the comment that feeling like you'd been heard is close to feeling like you've been loved. And I'm always complaining to my kids that I don't feel heard around them. I have a 13-year-old and I have a 3-year-old, and neither one of them listens to me. Can you tell me about how this book might be helpful to parents?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's what do I think is that parenting is so rewarding and so challenging, and one of our the biggest premises are mistakes are opportunities. And so I would say, as a father with my daughter listening online here, thank you for being here. I'm the first to say how difficult it is, and to put those things up front. So of course we all want to be heard. Parents want to be heard, kids want to be heard, and I think when we get into that in any relationship, whether it's about our backgrounds, talking to somebody, or a parent-child relationship, we want to be heard, and somebody needs to make the move of like, let me try to get you, because if you know I get you, then you can get me. So I think that's always kind of the default that I think is the most important, is when we feel that we're not being heard, trying to get another person's perspective. So I think we need to get what's going on with our kids, and then and kids that can then get what's going on for us. So I just think the default is empathy and compassion, really, for what's going on. Yeah, and to try to if it's not working in some way, try to unlock from that conversation, or that thing that's just turning out not to be a productive conversation. Those sticker charts and all those things, I don't think they're as important as feeling heard and cared about and loved. Yeah.
And I would just add, I'm not a parent. We have a cat, but I'm not a parent. I am an uncle and a godfather. But the thing I would add to what Jeff said is slowing down. It's one of the things. In fact, it's one of the things Jeff and I have been trying to do when we've been doing these bookstore events, is making sure that we're slowing down. But I find that with, I've taught a lot of kids before, and in dealing with my nieces and nephews, that slowing down and changing the pace of the conversation, and really focusing on just listening and trying to be interested in what the kid is saying. I find changes the dynamic, because it's different, as opposed to the same sort of back and forth that we have. And I think that's true in any relationship, whether it's spousal or parent-child. We all just want to make sure that the other person's listening. Yeah.
I would also say to this, it's also good thing to mess with it, mess it up, like unscript. So if it's a particular kind of dynamic that keeps happening, just wonder about what other character could I play here, rather than the mean mom or something like it, or the one who's not like. what other part of myself could I recruit here to change what's predictable, and to improvise my way to a different different state of mind here? And how do we introduce playfulness here? And I think that's one thing that we didn't talk about too much, but I think that's the other, I know that it is the other centerpiece of what we're writing about is we don't play enough, and we have to introduce play. We have to play at work. We have to play with people in our families. We have to make mistakes and goof around and do the unexpected sometimes in order to wind up in a different place.
One of the examples is I was at a holiday dinner with a tween who was not particularly happy to be there. She was pretty grumpy. And I just taught her an improv game of one word at a time, where she and me spoke one word at a time. And we ended up telling stories at the dinner table for, half an hour or whatever in between bites. But it was that engagement and that sense of play that kind of moved her out of her funk.
Nice. I'm going to try some of these things when my toddler's throwing a temper tantrum and see if they work. When you're in that moment, it's hard to come up with ideas. So that's the good thing about a book like this, is that you kind of have maybe some go-tos that you rely on.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Shelley Campbell has a question. Outside of a corporate or clinical setting, how might you engage a group of friends to engage in this? Improvising, I think she means.
Yeah, well, we have, my wife and I have a group of friends who are not performers or actors, and we have game nights, what have you. Of course, over the pandemic, we've been having Zoom nights or What's Up things where we watch something together. But playing these games has been, not to sound too pretentious, but has been really, I think, important to our couple of different ensembles, because people need something, because all they're doing is looking at screens every day, and that sense of play. So to answer Shelley's question, there's a number of exercises in our books. There's also terrific improv books. Keith Johnstone's book Improv, and Theater Sports for Improvisers. But and you could Google improv games. They're usually, like I was saying with the tween that I was talking to, word at a time. There's a number of exercises that are pretty straightforward. Jeff and I have often played A to Z, where we do a scene. My first line starts with the letter A, his starts with B, and so on. There's also, if you really want to up the ante, last letter, first letter, which is a listening game we play a lot when we're in a corporate setting, but it works well at a party, which is, in fact, Jeff, let's just try for a second. So whatever sentence you say, I'm just going to start mine with the last letter of your sentence, and then you'll start with the last letter of mine. So give me a sentence.
Ricky got bubble gum all over his shoe.
Everyone laughed because it was stuck to his shoe.
Everyone,
except for Teresa, who came over and gently scraped it off.
Fabulous she is, that Teresa, always helping everyone in her life.
Everyone in her life. Okay, all right, let's stop there. But there's so many very simple things that you don't need a board, you don't need a ball. It's just people playing together narratively. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. Like Jeff said earlier, mistakes are gifts. One of the things that I think it's important when you're looking at improvisation is to not worry about being good, not worrying about being witty or clever. It's just about playing. The playing is the success, is the winning.
And I'll add here that I was privileged to join a group right out of my psychiatry residency of psychoanalysts who were in their 70s and early 80s, who had been in an improv play group for 20 years, meeting once a month. And they did this to honor the idea that they knew that they needed to play in life. And this was an ensemble that they had created, and they would hire different teachers and directors. And it was really a play group. And when you think about it, we don't play like we do when we're kids. Dan's mentor, Keith Johnstone, says adults are atrophied children. And I would concur with that idea. And so this symbol of this group, we moved to New Mexico. And so I had to leave the group, has long been something I've longed for, actually, to be part of a play group like this, free of judgment, just about play. Nobody interpreting each other's stories that they create, though they were psychoanalysts. Yeah. And actually quite playful people in life, I think, as a result of doing this in an ongoing way.
How have you've been doing this kind of work for a while. How have you seen people's opinions or attitudes or practice of play change as we become more sucked into our technology? Have you seen a change in that between your two books or in your practices as either actors or in your psychiatry?
I mean, I would say that there's a relief every time if we run a retreat, like people say, oh my gosh, improv, but then actually it's like the most fun people have, and they just don't want to have a meeting. Let's just do this because there's such a desire. The more and more we're drawn to our devices and in virtual situations and on social media, the more we, I think, want to play and connect. I think that the drive and desire is getting stronger, and we're lonely, all of us, to various extents, and not necessarily aware of the many ensembles that we're part of and that we haven't checked in with. So that's the one thing I would say. I also would just add, we ran a research study last year with a group of psychiatry residents, improvising, 10 of them, and 10 not. And then COVID happened right in the middle, and we had to stop. And it was amazing that the group who had been improvising were actually much more engaged, described much less detachment with the onset of the pandemic than the group that had not been improvising.
And improvising, I think, is keeps you young. I think play keeps you young in terms of being engaged, being interested. I know as an improviser that I maintain a sense of play. I'm interested in finding games and engaging in playful ways. I think it makes me a happier person generally. And because we've written 2 books about this, I really feel compelled to walk the walk with regards to application. And that has helped not only my personal relationships, but it's definitely helped me with teaching. And I mentioned this in Ensemble. I mentioned the fact that when I first started teaching, I used to think, well, no, my job is to give you the information. When really, if you think about it, my job is to help you to discover the information rather than give it to you wholesale. And in fact, a teacher of mine referred to herself as a co-learner in teaching. In other words, even though she was ostensibly running a class, she was also learning along with us. And that mindset shift for me in the last 10 years has really helped my teaching, because I look at every class as an opportunity for me to learn something. And that sense of attention and curiosity from a teacher, I know, has been so important to me. If I think about mentors and teachers I've had over the years, the thing that resonates is their attention and their care with regards to how I was interacting with the class. And so I'm trying to pass that along or engage in that way going forward. Yeah.